Welcome to the Women in Vinyl podcast with Jenn DiEugenio, founder of Women in Vinyl and contributor Robyn Raymond. This podcast facilitates conversations with those working in the vinyl record industry to educate, demystify, and diversify the vinyl community.
Thanks for listening to episode 36 of the Women in Vinyl podcast, and happy 2023. You just heard Wisdom's Limit by the band Candace off their album New Future. Thanks to the band and friend Robbie Carroll of the label Found Object for the use of the song. Find the album at candaceisaband.bandcamp.com. In our first episode back, we have a really fun and exciting guest. Writer, director, producer, and vinyl nerd, John Chuldenko. He is the grandson of U.S. President Jimmy Carter and became the vinyl Indiana Jones when he found a secret record collection in the White House. In this episode, we explore how he found it, what's in it, the first record he played, and what he intends to do now that it's found. Enjoy. We're excited to have you join. And we would love if you would tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you got into records.
Yeah, my name is John Chuldenko, and I guess I am the world's leading expert in a tiny, tiny sliver of American cultural history because I have uncovered the hidden record collection at the White House.
I feel like there needs to be like a creaky door noise.
Yeah, that's what it was like. I mean, we're gonna talk about that whole thing.
Yes.
But that's exactly what it was like. Yeah, I mean, much like y'all, I grew up listening to vinyl. That was the only format there was, So when you collected music, that was all on vinyl, And throughout formats, I always maintained a love for it. I think, partially because of artwork and stuff, but I think nowadays I really appreciate the process of playing records, the methodical things of what you have to do. I've got two little girls, and I've taught them, especially my 8-year-old loves playing records. She loves to I got sort of a built-in kind of cabinet thing that a furniture maker friend made, and turntables up top, and she pulls them out, and she takes them out of their out of the jackets and dusts them off and puts the stylus on, and she loves the whole process, and they're appreciative of that. So
that's awesome.
Is she listening to the Muppets, or what is she listening to?
They are they're both on a big Beatles kick over the last. Well, my 12-year-old is on a T Swift kick, but who's not on a Taylor Swift kick right about now? So but they are both they are both in full swing in a Beatles resurgence. I have the maybe 2 years ago they did a series of the mono pressings, mastered at Abbey Road, Analog Chain, and they are very nice sounding. You listen to those records and it's hard to believe they're mono.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's so much going on and so much depth going on that you're like, wow, man. I mean, these are made with such care.
Yeah, that's cool.
And the backstory of those is great because they went sort of A to B. They went to master tapes, and then they also went. Nobody listens to the master tapes. 4 people heard the master tapes. You know what I mean? 5 people heard the master tapes, and then compared those to the ones that were issued, that were actually released, right? So the ones everybody's familiar with, and found like a sweet spot between them because playback technology was pretty crappy in the 60s. So taking advantage of the the sort of the modern advancements to bring out what's on the tapes.
Yeah.
So
if anyone listening hasn't read the NPR or Washington Post articles, how did you find out this secret?
Right. So it was on a family vacation. It was oddly enough on a family vacation. My grandfather's President Carter. So my mom married President Carter's oldest son decades ago. So most of my life. And every year usually between Christmas and New Year's, we go on a family trip somewhere in the world. And when I say somewhere in the world, I don't want you to think it's like Bora Bora and Tahiti and stuff. Sometimes it's like literally like chest deep in a swamp in like Central Florida. So I don't think so. Like it's very much a down to earth family, to say the least. So I do think we were in Florida. I think we had a bunch of little kids. I do think, if I remember correctly, we were at like Disney World or something. And so I'm hanging out with my uncles, and my Uncle Jeff is telling me this story, and they will usually talk about, growing up in the White House. And Uncle Jeff, it's weird. My impression of the White House it's a place where people live because my uncles lived there. You know what I mean? Like it was just it's a place where families live and grow up and do family stuff, right? So in addition to the press conferences and all the stuff you see on TV, right? So Jeff upstairs, there's the residence where you actually live. And there's a solarium up there. And my Uncle Jeff was up there, and he was having a party. He was in his 20s, and he's having a party with his buddies, as 20-year-olds do, right? And downstairs, there was some kind of official dinner going on. It was some kind of big event. But there's an elevator that you can get straight up and not have to go through the whole riffraff, And so Jeff's bringing friends upstairs. And they're hanging out and they're blasting music, right? And they're blasting the Stones, right? And I think it was Goat's Head. I think it's Goat's Head Soup. And on Goat's Head Soup, there is a song that I think is listed as Star, but we all know that song is actually Starfucker. Can I say Starfucker on your podcast?
Yeah, absolutely, you can.
So that's so that's on the record, and they're blasting it, and that's just Mick Jagger screaming like Starfucker, Starfucker, Starfucker. And he's like, I didn't hear him because the music was so loud, but Mom and Mrs. Mondale walked in, and he's like, right as everybody turns around, and Mick Jagger is just swearing over profanity after profanity, and he said, Mom and Mrs. Mondale did not stay to hang out very long. But it gives you a sense of what life is really like, that like there were regular kids rocking and rolling and hanging out.
Yeah.
So he's telling that story. I was like, wait a minute. So how did it work? Like, how'd you get your records? And he said, well, if there was something new, you could send somebody out and they would get it for you, or you just go to the record store and get your records. And he said, but there were also some records that were already there. I said, well,
what do you mean?
What do you mean? Yeah. Like,
Uh-huh.
Records already there, Jeff. And he said, yeah, the records. So that really sparked my curiosity, right? And I start researching like records in the White House, like a record library in the White House. And sure enough, like after a lot of just kind of research and digging, yes, there was a book library in the White House, and under First Lady Patricia Nixon's term, the Recording Industry Association of America approached her and said, hey, listen, there's books here. You should also have music here. And they curated what I'm assuming is the first ever record collection for a world leader. And so they did it. And so they put together a panel of experts and curators. And they split it up by genre and got the people to select an amount of records to be included in this record collection intended for the personal use of the president and the first family in the White House. So it's an intimate thing. I mean, it is like their personal record collection. It's upstairs. It was in the residence, and they are. I should send you all a picture.
Yeah,
it's so cool because I'm the only person to see this, and they are in vinyl binders, color coded by genre and embossed with the presidential seal on it with gold foil stampings. It's the White House Record Library. Robin, it's the coolest thing.
This organization, though, is like I'm really appreciating this organization.
I was just gonna say I'm gonna try and get you a seal made for your birthday.
Or they could be like, well, because I have a lot of questions about these binders and why they're in binders. However, I'm sort of like, Trapper Keepers, like, remember those?
You know what? They are not unlike Trapper Keepers without the flap. Trapper Keepers had the second flap and the plastic things,
the
whatever.
Velcro,
None of that, but it actually does kind of look like Trapper Keepers. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because they would want to like hermetically seal everything, right? For like,
it's just they're not sealed. They're like, just nerd out on record stores for a second. They are. I'm guessing there's a cardboard core, a very like a notebook, a small amount of padding, I guess, and then a vinyl top sheet with the presidential seal. I'm actually looking. I got to pull up and then embossed White House Record Library on it. Blue I know is popular. Red I think is classical. Yellow is spoken word. I think there's a green one, but they're all color coded by genre. And inside each of these binders is maybe like 7 or 8 records inside there.
Okay.
kind of alphabetically, but from what I can remember, anyway, we're getting ahead. That's what they look like. So I find out about this thing. I'm like, tell me more.
We have to go immediately.
Yeah. So I'm like, all right, how do I learn more about this? And I did this as a regular citizen. Like there were no strings pulled. There was like none of that stuff. I was a curious record nerd, right? So I called, but the only string I kind of did pull, I called somebody at my grandpa's library to see like, who do you know at the White House? Is there somebody I can call? You know, because otherwise you call like the direct number, which you can find online. You could just call them. They transfer you to like the Department of Crackpots and Wackos. But you can just call the White House. And so I get a number for the super friendly person in the office of the curator, and the office of the curator is, it's like when you show up at the White House, when they elect you president and you show up at the White House, you get to decorate. And the White House is like a museum. Like it's full of like artwork and furniture and just the coolest stuff ever. So if you're like, hey, I want the china cabinet from Hoover and I want the coffee table from Lincoln, they're like, all right, cool, man, we will do that for you. Yes, and they will do it, right? Yes, and the curator of the White House is in charge of that, the archiving and maintenance of this collection, right? I call them. They have no idea what I'm talking about. Nothing, and it's basically like, there's a what? Yeah, okay, fine. We'll call you back. And I thought that was it. That's the end of my journey.
Sure.
Yeah. Right.
Don't call us. We'll call you.
Yes, that was it. That was it. Right. Well, guess what? They called me. Like they call me back. I get a thing. It says, yeah, turns out we do have a record collection at the White House. It's in a secure, undisclosed storage facility, so I can't let you see it. And I'm like,
bummer.
First of all, this is like an email from it's got the real White House email address on it, and it has words like secure, undisclosed storage facility in it. Like I'm like,
Area 52
for real, right?
Or 33.
Yeah, Area 33.
Oh my gosh, Area
45.
33.3. That's Jen, I'm gonna borrow that for something about this project. Oh sure. Man, that's good. Oh, Area 33 and a third. Yeah, so I'm like, so my follow-up is, can I come see it? And that was like a whole nother can of worms. But you know what? Yeah, like it ended up working out. Like I was like, hey, I was nice and I was friendly and respectful, you know, and I had to jump through a bunch of hoops, you know, and you got to get approvals from a bunch of people and do the whole thing. But they're like, yeah, we're gonna take them out of storage for you. We're gonna move them into the White House, and you can come look at them. So I'm like, cool. Cool is probably not what I actually said. But yes, to that effect. So through my research, I'm discovering the process through which this was curated, like who these curators were. There was volume 1 in 1973, volume 2 in 79. And so the 73 edition, the Nixon edition, and I'll focus on the popular music, maybe because it's what most people are interested in. The jazz segment is fantastic. It is it's extensive and it's very well done. The popular music was curated by Johnny Mercer, incredible songwriter, right? You know, Ashes to Topeka, Santa Fe, lyrics to Moon River. I mean, you know, I'm a big American Songbook fan, and it's wonderful. Maybe not the biggest rock and roll guy, okay. And I don't think I think if he were on the Zoom call, I don't think he would disagree with that. Yeah. He had advisors and he reached out to people to help him curate this. But you get stuff there that maybe certainly indicative of his taste, certainly indicative of the time, and maybe indicative of Nixon's taste. Pat Boone, Don Ho, a lot of big band, you know, a lot of that kind of stuff. Fine. It's 1973. Beatles had done all of their, you know, stuff there. You know, Dylan done, you know, there's a handful. There's like I think two. I think there's 2 Dylan records, but I think one might be in the folk segment of it. But you look at it and you're like, wow, 1973, maybe not the most reflective of American sort of rock and roll popular culture at the time, but it's easy to armchair quarterback this kind of stuff. It's easy to I'm sure we could pick apart anybody's record collection together and be like, oh, why is that not in there? Or why didn't you got this record but not that? Anybody could do that, right? So I think it's important to sort of put yourself in the shoes. Having said that, there's like the first Elton John record in 1973. Oh. When Elton John was like the dude of the troubadour, you know, I mean, there was he was not Elton John, you know what I mean? So, think, is Tommy in there, or like, yeah, there's some stuff that's really like, oh wow, cool. Like there's some foresight there, right?
Progressive moments.
For
No
the
Black Sabbath,
time.
though, I guess.
For the time.
Well, 73. No, there would be no Black Sabbath, right?
Yeah, there is Master of Reality.
When is it released?
71 to 73 is Master of Reality. in
These
Volume
are
4.
the official
Oh.
catalogs. I am holding up
Whoa.
the White House record library. There is Volume 1 and there is Volume 2. I have bought all of them that I could find on the eBays and stuff.
It's cute.
So they're all listed in there. So anyway, in 79, the RAA got together again and was like, let's try to look at this again, and maybe there were some omissions that we could probably fix, right?
Well,
so
listen, you need the Sex Pistols, you need Zeppelin, you need
right?
It's exactly what they did, and they put together a group of curators to sort of fill in those holes, and again focusing on the popular music. They did a Latin genre. They expanded the jazz genre. They split up like sort of country and white gospel and R&B and black gospel. And it had blended the soul. I mean, there's really interesting selections in there, but focusing on the popular music selections. Yeah, there is some stuff in there that when you think about, like, these are records included in the library at the White House. It's like hanging like a Damien Hirst painting, or like a Mapplethorpe in the middle of the West Wing. You know what I mean? It's
God,
like,
right.
I mean, really, there's Frank Zappa. There's like Funkadelic is in there.
Cool.
Yes, Robin. Nevermind the Bollocks is in there. Rocket to Russia from the Ramones is in there.
Amazing.
Yeah. I mean, there's stuff that's really the First Class record is in there with the 7-inch that came with the U.S. pressings. Which almost always gets lost, like whenever you find it, right?
All of the time. Yeah.
Yeah,
Rocket to Russia is actually a pretty controversial ad too, just because of the time and like post Cold War type
100%. And you've got to and you've got to think of it like in historical context, right? Like this was 79, and you think like who is going to go on to make big things? Like what's going on in the cultural climate? And they were really careful to realize that the 70s were a very tumultuous time, in America. And these records, many of them, reflect that, and what's going on in the culture economically and socially and, culturally. And so it's really fascinating to dig through and see what's in there.
How big is this entire collection?
Yeah, how many pieces?
I think the first... it's tricky because you got space considerations too. I mean, the White House is big, but the residence, like, somebody's got to live there, right? I think the first edition is maybe like 2,000 or so records. This update is maybe half that. I'm going to be honest, I have not counted them. I've got everything listed, but I haven't actually counted them. So it exists. I find out it exists. I jump through the hoops. I get approval to go. I tracked down everyone who's still alive who was on the initial selection committees, right? And I'm like, hey, guess what? Remember that thing you did back in the 70s? And they're like, who is this dude? What? It was the 70s. I don't remember much. No, they were all like super, super kind. And I brought a couple of them back that were still around.
Cool.
And we went back to the White House. And they're like, okay, so this is all happening in like mid-December, late December. And the White House, a lot of people understand, it's a government building. Like back then, there's still like linoleum floors and stuff. It's not like there are nice parts of it, but a lot of it's kind of like where people work, right? These people want to go home for the holidays, right? So it was empty, right? And it was during a time when occasionally we go through these government shutdown threats, right? And there's a budget impasse or something that's going on in Congress, right? And you don't know if the government's going to be shut down. So I call the person at the curator's office. She's like, yeah, doors might be locked, maybe not. I don't know. So
roll the dice, John.
Yeah, right. So I am glued to CNN, and I'm like, "What's happening now? What's happening now? Oh my gosh, am I going to get? I've got like flights booked for everybody. Turns out it worked out. Whatever happened happened. And Obama was president at that time, so his family was all on vacation. Like everybody's gone. He had to hang back because of the whole budget crisis craziness, right? So he's there. He's
Awesome.
upstairs in the White House. They said, we can't move it to the China room. Something's going on. Can we just move it down? There's a kind of around the, I don't know what he goes, the side or the front. There's a movie theater in the White House, and they put it all in the theater right between the screen and like the front row, just kind of stacked up. So I walk in.
Did they give you a turntable at least?
I'm getting there, Rob. Here's the thing. With all the approvals and all the process and everything like that, there's a saying that it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission sometimes.
Yep.
Always.
If I had opened up that can of worms, it's probably got to get like congressional approval to bring a turntable in the White House, right? So
Like sneaking a Newmark under your
yeah, right. But I sourced a hi-fi shop in DC, and they let me borrow I think it's a music hall, I can't remember which model, and a little preamp and a couple little like tabletop speakers, right? Like a little basic setup. I dumped my clothes out in the hotel. I put the turntable and the speakers inside my rollaway bag and roll that sucker through the metal detector at the White House.
Amazing.
And again, it's Christmas time. Everybody's gone. Like, so everybody's like, I mean, like they have the security. I mean, it's tight. I'm not going to say it's not like, it's locked down, but I'm like, bring it. I mean, it's nothing ding it. It's a turntable, Bring it in there. They got a little table set up.
Amazing.
Set up the turntable. And I walk in and they are in cardboard moving boxes. They're just all stacked up willy-nilly by the screen of the movie theater. And we all kind of look at each other, and the air went out of the room, and we were like, oh my gosh, like these are all the records. And the people that were there who curated them for the first time never got to see them. They did a presentation to them, but they never got to see the records actually installed. They never actually got to lay eyes on them.
I just keep thinking like that's some intern's job that had to go move all of those records from the storage unit. After just moving, I'm like, that poor person.
Yeah, totally. Exactly.
Hold that thought. It's time for an Amanda fact.
If you like records, you've seen the image of a sweet terrier looking down into an old school speaker horn, his head tilted to the side. This logo is actually based on a real dog named Nipper. Apparently, he wasn't entirely sweet either. He got his name from his tendency to actually nip at people, which isn't very cool of him, even though history has turned him into one of the coolest and most iconic pups to ever live. Nipper belonged to a fella named Mark Berard, who lived in England in the late 1800s. Nipper was known to be especially dedicated to his owner. But when Mark passed away in 1887, Nipper went to live with Mark's brother, Francis, who was a painter. Francis created the original painting of Nipper looking into the gramophone's horn. He titled it His Master's Voice. Francis then decided to try and capitalize on his work by copywriting it and shopping the image around to be used as a marketing image. Edison Bell, they weren't having it. They said dogs don't listen to gramophones, doesn't make any sense. But Emil Berliner's gramophone company went for it and started using the image a few months later in January of 1900. The logo remains an icon synonymous with recorded sound to this day.
You all know by now that Robyn and I are on opposite ends of the record organizational spectrum. But one thing we do agree on is how fantastic Keppel Design's record dividers and record blocks are. Beautifully handcrafted by expert craftswomen in San Francisco, Keppel dividers are sleek, sophisticated, customizable, and built to last. No matter how you organize, Keppel are the dividers to use. Get $10 off your first order of $85 or more using code WOMENINVINYL at checkout. www.keppeldesign.com. That's KOEPPEL design.com. And now, back to the episode. Well, and like, who are these people that curated them? Like, are they just random curators, or are they music specific?
No, it's solid. Like I said, like Johnny Mercer did the popular music in volume 1 in 73. Volume 2 got a little bit, a lot of journalists. So Bob Blumenthal, who wrote for the Boston music critic for the Boston Globe. John Lewis did the jazz from the Modern Jazz Quartet in New York. So he did that. I'm trying to think who did. I got it right here. Francis Preston did the country, folk, and white gospel. Ed Bland did rhythm and blues and black gospel. John Hammond shared it. So John Hammond, credited for discovering Dylan, Springsteen, Aretha Franklin.
And so these are the people that you're walking into this room with, like some.
No, no, everybody's gone. I mean, Hammond has passed away. Ed Bland had passed away right then. I brought Bob Blumenthal and then Kit Rackless, who was another journalist that consulted on the project. Yeah. So we're there and we open these cardboard boxes, and there they are. These vinyl binders embossed with the presidential seal. This is the White House Record Library and gold foil lettering. Yeah, you guys saw Indiana Jones.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? It's like Indiana Jones. That's
Thinking about
exactly what it's like.
Yeah.
It's like record nerd Indiana Jones. Yeah, so we pull a lot, and those guys, it's like walking through memory lane. They're like, oh man, I remember when we chose this. I remember the discussions we got into. I remember the disagreements we got into choosing a certain record, and it didn't take us long to kind of find our favorites. We were digging through stuff. I found My Name Is True from Elvis Costello. I found the first Clash record, and we're pulling all these out, and the turntable's there. And we kind of look at each other and we're like, oh, well, what are we gonna play? It was like that. They are in pristine condition. It's like walking into a record store in 79. I mean, everything was like, the jackets were opened, but many of them still had the cellophane on them. It was just, they were absolutely brand new. So it was like take them out of things, like drop them
the
down.
white glove. Was it the white glove moment? Like, did you have gloves on?
Later on, one of the curators, like 2 hours in, is like, you guys should maybe wear this. Again, it's like Christmas time, Yeah. So so the first thing, so I think it was Bob who suggested, he finds Astral Weeks from Van Morrison, which is an incredible record. It's one of my favorite records.
I love that record.
What Springsteen said, it made him believe in the divine or something like that. There's a great Springsteen quote about Astral Weeks. And we put it on, and it was just the perfect soundtrack to the perfect moment.
Oh, I love that. Like Sweet Thing. Like I can imagine that just being played.
Yeah, it was absolutely beautiful. It transcended. It really just wonderful. So we're there. And this experience is not lost on any of us. Like, we're looking around and we're like, yeah, we're in the movie theater of the White House at Christmas time, listening to records that no one's ever seen before. Part of it was like being in a bank vault. Part of it's Indiana Jones. Part of it's like, it was really, really wild. And we spent hours there, right? And so we're playing Elton John, and we're playing the first Clash record, and we're playing played the Ramones record, and Who's Next is in there. We played that. So we're just going through and listening to records and telling stories, and the guys are talking about selecting these musics and their careers and how they got chosen to do this thing in the first place.
Yeah, did they have like a point system, or were they just like, okay, so your assignment today is, and then they're like, go do your homework and then come back? Or was it like, on the fly, they met, like, give me your first 5 records, go?
They met monthly in New York. And and John Hammond put together this group, and everybody would meet up there and discuss it. And everybody was kind of in charge of their own genres and offered suggestions, but the whole group would have to vote on the actual inclusion of it. So they all had a say, and it was not always. There was stuff that everybody agreed on. There was some stuff that people didn't agree on, and there was some trading. There was some like, all right, listen, like this could kind of fit in your genre. You've got a space, I don't have a space. Can you pop this over in rhythm and blues instead of rock and roll or whatever? Instead of popular music.
So how do we do this now? I'd like to be a part of this curating group.
Well, so listen, and to your point earlier, Jen, was. So the Monica from the curator's office walks in after a few hours. We were there like, it felt like all day. It's like, hey, you guys done? And I'm like, yeah, right, Robin. I was like, what do you mean done? Like,
this is my job.
You're like, look at all of these.
And I'm like, I we can't sleep there. I'm like, I guess we are, right? So these like 2 or 3 dudes in coveralls with dollies came in, and we put the records away back in the binders that they came from, and we put them back in the boxes that we found them in, and they came and they wheeled these away, and I watched them these stacks of cardboard boxes wheel up and out the door. And
single tube.
That's that's what I was thinking. I was like, wait a minute, like, so this is going to go away back to that secure undisclosed storage facility, right?
Yeah.
And no one's ever going to see these.
Yeah.
And I thought about a couple things. One, so these were done, started in 79, completed in 1980. So 1980 to now, man, there's like 40 some years. I don't know. And I've been thinking about this, even with the advent of rock and roll or birth of jazz and stuff. I don't know there's been a time period these last 40 some years where there has been such an evolution of music. So yeah, and that's what's going through my head. So much has happened. There is nothing. Yeah. I mean, 1980, there is no hip hop in there. There is no
man,
electronic music, no boy bands, no Backstreet Boys or Madonna or New Kids on the Block. No
Britney Spears,
Public Enemy. No, I mean, obviously none of that stuff has happened.
No Whitney Houston.
No Whitney Houston.
Like that's
Thriller is not in
right
there.
Wow. I mean, that was my first record, so I was.
That is crazy.
Sure, so.
Good first record. Good with the gatefold and Michael hanging out there with a tiger.
Yeah,
man. So it's been a personal project of mine to tell people about it and to try to get this thing reinvigorated. And when you think about the 79 edition, that was so much of that was protest music.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I mean, and you think about, my God, like, especially the events of the last couple of years, and I don't know how you do volume 3 and not have NWA in there.
Absolutely.
So much has gone on, and music has been a touchstone of so many cultural moments over the last 40 some years. That it's exciting, and all that should be on the table. I mean, all that is absolutely indicative of who we are as a country and who we are as a people and what we're feeling and how we're thinking. And so the White House Historical Association reached out to me not a couple months ago and was like, hey, what's going on with that project? I'm like, yeah, I still want to do it. I'd love to get some traction on it. Like, well, we want to have you on our podcast. So I told a little bit about it on their podcast, and then the phone started ringing. And so right now I feel like the gears are in motion, and there's some really interesting stuff that I will keep you guys posted on. I will. And and it's interesting, and it causes you to think, like, how we do it. The world is different than it was before. How we do it format wise, how we do it symbolically versus what I want to say, I guess, like literally or something. Like, do we install another 2,000 records upstairs in the Biden's living room? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, but there are ways to do it, I think, to do it right and to celebrate it. I mean, it was vinyl back then because that's all there was, and now I think, there's a way to do it, like I said, symbolically and also accessibly, because it's important that the most amount of people get to hear what was chosen
and why
for the president and the first family, and not just this president. This is the presidency. These both of these existing volumes, are designed to span administrations. It's about like the next one and the next one and the next one. What do we want to send? What message do we want to send to the leader of the country?
It is sort of fascinating too here, because there is such a divide as far as Democrats and Republicans, and the fact that this music sort of bridges that is really kind of fascinating, and that there wasn't any sort of, banned records, I guess, that anything was included is pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right, Jen. And that was something I thought about too, where it's like, certainly not in recent years. I mean, this country is so divided, and I'm not one to say that, hey, music's going to save the world, but you know what? Maybe it'll start a conversation, and it's just like the three of us were talking. Oh, you got to include this one. You got to include this one. You got to put this one. Like, cool. Like, no matter where you are on the political spectrum or like wherever you are, like, I always describe it like gears. Like, however your gears are spinning, there's gonna be something you can connect with. Like, you guys, you might absolutely hate each other, but you both agree that Born to Run's a freaking banger. And then you're like, all right, like, let's, like, we can talk about Springsteen, and then maybe we can talk about union rights, and then maybe we can talk about policy, and then maybe we can realize that, hey man, you're not the jerk that I thought you were. If we can connect over music, maybe you're not that far away from connecting over something else.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, because like Obama made a couple of playlists on Spotify, and like that was a whole conversation point too, right? Because
fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are a lot of people in Congress and in the cabinet that are music fans that are actually in bands, you know, which is kind of funny. Yeah,
it is. It's an odd thing to put together in your brain.
Yeah, but I think a lot of them actually play together. You know, I mean, I know like Anthony Blink, our Secretary of State, is in a band. You know, was in a band, like plays music. You know, so like there are people who really appreciate that, and you know, so where my head is now is, how do we move this forward? Who do we get? I mean, before it was a very closed door, like we have this group of curators, each is assigned a specific genre. I don't know how well that translates to the way we think now. I mean, I think about my girls, they are completely genreless. Like they will listen to things. I mean, and I think that's true with like teenagers and stuff now too. Like they celebrate, they appreciate everything. And when I was growing up, it wasn't like, dude, you were a punk rock kid and you stayed in your lane. You know, it was Circle Jerks,
so funny,
you know, it was Descendants, it was whatever it was, and you like, bam, that's your lane, dude. You're not listening to Jimmy Buffett. Nope.
Well, and it's funny that you say that too, because it's like when I post things on Instagram, sometimes like my records, and sometimes there will be something random. Like I love Dua Lipa, which is completely different from Black Sabbath. And but sometimes I still feel the need to be like, I know this is a little weird for people, but I really like this record. But nowadays it's like, it's because I'm of that generation too, where it was like, nope, I was the metal kid. This is the kind of stuff I like. So posting something like that feels strange. But yeah, you're right. The younger generations, it's like gender fluid.
Yeah,
in all kinds of ways.
Genre fluid.
Genre fluid. Genre and
totally.
Gender fluid. Yeah.
That reminds I gotta look at that NPR Tiny Desk concert with Dua Lipa during COVID to show to my 12-year-old, because she got into her through that Elton John duet. Yeah, it's a good one. So yes, so how do we do it? And instead of just music journalists, I would love to open it up to Congress people, politicians, talk show hosts, you know, people on either side of the political spectrum, to try to find some kind of common ground. And that's something you can, and we're still talking about format and stuff, but like you could flip through this thing and be like, wait, that's you know, who Stephen Colbert, you know, what's he into? Oh my gosh, wait, wow, man, I may or may not agree with this person, but man, I really like that record, you know, and you sort of discover this stuff, you know, and
maybe you need to do like a poll, and like, just so that you could get like starting points, even to be like, hey,
you think a public component?
Yeah, like, here you go, America. If we're going to do this, you know, because there's a really great punk rock label on Instagram, and they go like, they kind of do a round robin tournament of bands, and they're like, here's all the like records that this band has put out. What's the best record? And they put it up in stories and get everybody to like vote on them. So it's like, and then they do band versus band and like all these kind of different things. But that one I appreciate, because it's like, it helps you drill down a little bit, because the sheer number of songs that are released every single day for the last even like 15 years is insurmountable. Like, and everybody's going to have an opinion
exactly
on everything.
Yeah, and that's actually a great point, Robin, is the sheer number of songs that are released. I mean, back in the 50s, it was a single-based industry, right? Like you got the 45 from so and so, and you played the song. Then we moved into albums, and now we're kind of back into the singles and EP world. So, I mean, do we do this as albums? Do we do this as song? Like, how? It's a lot to think about, and try to maintain a historical context and a scope, and sort of what's the best reflection. And not try to box it into like, no, it's got to be on an album, because if somebody released an EP that was fantastic, then come on,
right.
You know what I mean? So I think there's a degree of flexibility. I think it'll look very different than it did in 73 and 79, but I think that's probably but so do we.
Absolutely,
you know?
For sure.
But to your point too, like you were talking about that label on Instagram. Yeah, okay. I think we can all agree that like Madonna should probably be in there.
100%.
Is it like a prayer Madonna? Is it borderline Madonna? Is it you know what I mean? Like is it Rain Madonna? Like where do we go? You know what I mean? Like it's like you can't put everything. Where do you stand? Because when I look through Volume 1 and Volume 2, there are a lot of best ofs. There are a lot of greatest hits.
Interesting.
Especially because a lot of like you get, you know, Chuck Berry's greatest hits. They were all singles anyway, and that makes the most sense, obviously. So okay, so I will go through it. So in volume 1, the 73 edition, we've got essential. Okay, so best. We'll look at this. Okay, essential, great years, greatest hits in September of my years. Then Frank Sinatra, and then Nancy, right under that, Nancy Sinatra's greatest hits.
Okay.
Yes, but that's the fun. I mean, that's what's really fun is it always sparks a conversation. Whenever I tell people about it, they're like, "Oh, you got to have The Cure in there." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, sure. Well, what are you gonna do? Disintegration? Are you gonna do Head on the Door? Like, what are you gonna do?" And then it's always sort of sparks an interesting sort of favorites conversation, but always with a lot of passion, and it's one of those things that I know, like, whoever I'm in a conversation with, you can always talk about music. If somebody's got an opinion about something, and it's fantastic. And the more you know about it, the deeper those conversations can go, or the broader they can go. And there's really beauty in it. And I think, like I was saying before, like at a time when we're so divided, like maybe the idea of reinvigorating a record collection for the use of the president and future presidents, like maybe that's something that might maybe not get us on the same page, but get us talking. Right?
Yeah, it's like a time capsule almost. You know what I mean? Like where everybody's like, "Ooh, let's open the thing. Like, let's see what Grandpa put into the time capsule 50 years ago."
It felt like that. I mean, when we were opening these binders that no one had seen before, that the 1980 edition had never been seen. That was delivered the day that my grandparents were leaving office. Like there were bleachers set up in Pennsylvania Avenue. There were moving trucks in the driveway, and they did the ceremony in January.
Yeah.
I mean, so no one had ever seen these records, and you're in there and you're looking at Woodstock soundtrack and Who's Next and Neil Young's Decade and just all these just really like landmark albums.
I just want to clarify too, for anyone's listening, the binders, like the records are in something that's in a binder. They're not like hole punched or anything. Like they're pristine condition, like you're saying.
Oh yeah. So the records are the record in the sleeve, in the jacket, right? And then each jacket is inside each of those jackets are collected in what's like a trapper keeper without the holes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Just want to clarify so people aren't like, "Oh my God."
No.
Is there a classical section?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, massive classical, especially in the 73 edition.
Right.
Yeah. That's not exactly my wheelhouse, but I can just tell it's solid, and like I said, the jazz selection in volume 1 is excellent. Willis Conover curated it, and then it was just in volume 2 kind of updated with some of the new composers and musicians that were going on at the time, so that was, and all of the curators wrote these little essays in the beginning, sort of talking about like what their philosophy was, like when they started this project, and how they how they took it on, and what they tried to do, and not really overstep but maybe add to, and sort of the philosophy that they worked under.
Well, it's the perfect person to find it. I mean, this needs to be a book, a documentary, and that's right in your wheelhouse. So I'm waiting for it.
It's so much fun, y'all. It's one of those great things you could, like I said, like you can talk to anybody about, and they've all got it always sparks a very animated, passionate conversation, and that's what's so fun about it, right?
Yeah.
Man,
are you going to go back and visit? Do you have visitation rights?
Listen, that's the plan. The plan is to update this and go back and do a presentation and dust these things out. They deserve to live somewhere, and I'm sure the storage facility, which I was not privy to the storage facility. I'm sure it's climate controlled. I'm sure it's fantastic. But they should be kind of out, maybe and I'm just spitballing, but
Smithsonian.
I was like,
or a roving
exhibit.
Or a roving collection,
tour.
Let's tour it. Let's tour it around. We take a couple selections and see the binders.
Binders.
But what would you do? So respectively, what would you do? So there's no. I'm gonna go ahead and say like there's no metal in there, right? I mean, I guess you can make the argument that some of these selections would eventually become, some of the signatures would eventually be Zeppelin and stuff like that might eventually become whatever.
Sure.
Where do you go? Like, how do you choose it in the evolutions of metal, and reconciling Sabbath, of course, and
well, I
Judas
mean, yeah,
Priest
like
and,
you would
and hair metal and
yeah. I mean,
right?
I feel like honestly, and not just because I'm biased, it would have to be like Master of Reality, because Master of Reality is where they then down tune the guitar to have a different sound, which then spawns Stoner Rocks. Then you have Sleep, which spawns some of the post rock, post metal. So, I mean, I feel like that's sort of definitely got to be there.
I mean,
right.
D. Snyder should have just like an honorary mention anyway, because he was one of the guys that went and testified in Congress about
I just played that YouTube clip. Yep.
Yeah.
I played it for my 12-year-old too. Yeah.
Yeah. So Twisted Sister's got to be in there just because.
Well, and then I mean, Riot Girl stuff, like that's got to be in there.
Absolutely.
I mean, Twisted Sister also in the fact that when you think of like gender fluidity, you know, and all that kind of like, whoa, like, wow, that was really groundbreaking. Certainly for the time. I mean, that was shocking, you know? Yeah, absolutely.
Cyndi Lauper, for sure.
Of course, right? So, Robyn, where do you go on the punk rock thing? Do we start with like we already have a Ramones record in there?
Yeah, I mean, you have the Ramones, but then, you know, you've got the whole, like, where do you prioritize like American punk rock over import punk rock too? I mean, you've got the DC hardcore side, that whole section. So, I mean, you can't.
So we do Minor Threat, we do Fugazi, we do Bad Brains.
Bad Brains for sure.
You can't have it without Black Flag. I mean, which also, you know, you have like Suicidal Tendencies on the West Coast. You know, I mean, you've got like, there's so many non-negotiables,
right? Like, and everybody's got a thing, and the great thing is like everybody's right, you know, in their own way. Everybody's right, you know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, you would, you know, Jen. So the most amount of records that anyone has here is 4, right? So you could probably so for all the Sabbath fans in the world, like, what do you get? You get 2, maybe, you know? I mean, it's kind of like, what do you?
Well, because you probably have to do like self-titled, let's say, Master of Reality. And then you probably and then you'd have to probably go into Dio era, because even though I'm an Ozzy era, you would have to represent that. I mean, because then Dio is a huge showman and a huge part of that too. So
well, and then birthed all of like Metallica and Megadeth and all of the like speed metal and thrash too. So you know, I mean,
so interesting.
Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue.
It's fun. It's you know, it's great. I think it causes us all to kind of reflect and think about what's important to us, what's important to the country, you know.
It's like a more broad desert island question, because you can choose more, but you know, like, oh, in this one.
Well, and that's the thing, John, like, how are you going to figure out what to cap it at? Because like, okay, so the original version was 2,000, and then you got like an addendum for an extra 1,000. Now you've got to span 40 years, essentially 44 years. So that's like, how many different administrations have there been in that section? What, like 11, I guess, right?
Well, if you can
minus the repeats.
So 39 to 46, right? So
So I mean, how many records do you get? Because that would be the first
and that
question.
brings up the idea of physicality, you know, like, you know, are things done as QR codes and then a selection of symbolic records? Yeah, I think, you know, when this hits, you know, when it all hits the news and everything, and it's like, wait, there's a vinyl collection at the White House and they're updating it. Well, maybe I need a record collection. You know, what would I put in my home record collection? That's the way my thing. I mean, I've got stuff in my office, but upstairs in the living room, like where there's no TV, it is just turntable, and it's like I said, a furniture maker friend made this vinyl cabinet. Awesome. I can't remember what it holds, but a few hundred records. And so to me, it's not about quantity. It's like, what am I going to sit down and listen to? It's the protein of the, right? It's like, this is what, like, these are our Sunday morning records, or this is what we play, like when the fireplace is on and we're just chilling out at night, you know, like those kind of things. So it's more about like, that's kind of the process I do. I curate stuff all the time. And curate is an overused word, I think, but that's kind of it. Like, what's really going to go in my thing? Like, what records do I want from a longevity? Like, what do I actually want on vinyl? Because you can listen to anything anytime. That's all agreed upon, right?
Right.
But what I really want to have is an archival piece, know?
Totally.
And because of it's an original pressing, or it's a radio pressing, or it's the gatefold edition, or whatever it happens to be, or repressing from the master tapes, or whatever it is, you know?
Or it's like your feels collection. That's, you know, like it's less archival, and it's more like, this is the one that I've been kicking around with for 25 years.
Yeah, you get a personal story to it. And that's what I'm really, when we reach out to these people across the political spectrum, across media and culture and authors and musicians and everybody, right? What I hope is I get personal stories. I really hope I get personal stories. I'm choosing these records, this record, because it means so much to me because of this. And that's where you really connect with people. We might have similar tastes, but man, if we both connect over something about our childhood or whatever, you know, if we both like the same whatever record it is, I mean, wow, like that's a real special. This reminds me of being 12 years old in Detroit. Oh, this reminds me of being 12 years old in Florida, and like, oh man, we had the same experiences when we were little. I mean, my God, that's absolutely beautiful. You know, and if this project somehow makes some people connect like that, then man, I mean, that's why I'm doing this.
Who would you go record shopping with if you could?
Who would I go record shopping with if I could?
That should be our
like. Is that like a dinner conversation, like that like living or dead kind of dinner conversation?
I'm trying to work on a new question for our podcast, because we always ask this like really obscure question at the end of the podcast, and it's been a stumper, and I'm trying to stay on that.
No, it's good. It's like that dinner conversation. I mean, wow. I mean, if it were one person, God, that's interesting. I mean, because part of the joy of record shop, it's obviously it's not in the find, it's in the search, right?
Sure, totally.
So it's in that process, that time that you spend remembering the outfit. I walk into a record store, I can't remember anything. I can't remember. It's like a vacuum of thought. Like I can't. All the stuff I wanted to get completely evaporates the second.
Yes.
I'm basically wandering aimlessly. So who am I going to wander around some halls aimlessly with? You know, I mean, I think, you know, and I think, Bourdain would probably have some great stories to talk about as we're going. I think Hunter Thompson would have some interesting stories, because he would find a record and be like, oh, I remember when I saw these guys, I was writing about these guys, and tell some crazy story. It's the stories I think you'd get, not even about the records, the stories you would hear in between looking
while you're doing it.
I love that.
You know, that'd be kind of cool. Man,
that's a good question.
Thank you. Been percolating.
We're switching it up. I love it.
No, it's good. It's good. Now I'm thinking about that more. I mean, I bet, or people who've toured with everybody, you know what I mean? Like that would be fantastic. Fun.
Well, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, this has been awesome, John.
This is so much fun. I'm just so psyched about what y'all are doing, and it's just so great. You know, it's so much fun to be here and to talk with like-minded people and nerd out on records and things. Man.
And please do keep us posted on everything. If there's anything we can do from our little corners of the world to help.
You guys are, you're definitely on the list of the updates on this. Because wait, Austin and Robyn, where are you?
I'm in Calgary.
So central Canada.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Jen, I gotta get out to Austin. I get out to Austin. My best friend, I probably told you, my best friend growing up has a barbershop there now. I helped him.
Oh, cool.
Helped him get that started. Yeah.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
The Texas barber service.
Well, you'll have to let me know. Yeah. Next time you're here.
Yeah, totally.
We can show you around the plant. You can see some records. Yeah.
So cool. And then I got to figure out a way to get to Canada.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I might be in LA.
The fan here in America. I'm going to be.
That's what everybody says, and I say there's more than there's. We got lots of room for you.
Yeah. So I'll keep y'all posted on all things. White House Vinyl Collection.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's super special.
Yeah.
I'm glad that somebody that is so excited about it has championed it too. Like that's the best part, where it could be like this like stuffy like archivist that's like, oh yes, here is the White House record collection.
Yeah, or flip side, like influencer, who was just like for the flash and stuff and not really caring about what it means and what we're saying by choosing this music, and I think that's I think it just takes it takes a lot of heart to do something like this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much,
Jen. Thank you. Thanks for reaching out.
Yeah. Thanks for getting back. I really was like, this is a shot in the dark. Here we go. But I read that article and I was like, people have to know, especially within our community, because I know everyone's going to geek out on this. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, we will let you get back to your day, and thank you so much. And we will be in touch.
Oh, you guys are the best. Yeah. Reach out anytime you want.
Awesome.
All right. Have a great night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Women in Vinyl podcast. You can join our ever-growing list of sponsors. Other record labels: Selector, Couple Design, Eargasm, Groove Washer, Glowtronics, New Gen Audio, and Vinyl Revolution Record Show. And thanks for sponsoring the show. Hey, as always, you can join our conversation on Instagram or send us a note at media@womeninvinyl.com. Clock us. Send us info. If you have a question, we got the answer, or we'll find it. We won't lie to you. And check out womeninvinyl.com for past episodes, the store, the job board, and the library of resources. Don't forget to like and subscribe and give us a review on your favorite podcast delivery method. You can also contribute to furthering our mission at patreon.com/womeninvinyl. Hey, guess what? This episode, 45 minutes. You know there was more. You want more? You get more. Go to patreon.com and you can get more. And you'll find all the B-sides, the deep cuts, and the amazing extras, including longer episodes, and contribute to the creation of scholarships and educational opportunities to further the demystification, the infiltration of more women and non-binary identifying humans into the vinyl making space, decreasing those turnaround times every week. Yeah, we love your records. We want you to love them too. womeninvinyl.com.
This episode has been brought to you by Women in Vinyl and Red Spade Records. Thank you for listening. Please remember to subscribe, and you can always contact us directly by visiting www.womeninvinyl.com.